The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this Test Studio webinar. We're just waiting for more of the registrants to join. So let's give it a few more seconds and we're going to start. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much for your patience. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the globe you join today's Test Studio webinar. We have our R1 2020 version rolled out, so we're gonna see what's new in the next 60 minutes or so. Just before we continue with this presentation, for the sake that you can see my screen and hear me well, I would ask you to click on the little hand icon that you can see on your GoToMeeting panel, so I can make sure that everything is okay. Right. Thank you very much for your feedback and welcome one more time. Today I'm going to host the webinar with my colleague Andrew Wayland, who is the manager of the sales engineering team in Telerik and is a certified Scrum Master. My name is Peter. I'm a sales engineer for Telerik, specializing in Test Studio, of course. I'm a certified and professional Scrum Master and Prince 2 practitioner. Before we start, a few of housekeeping rules for this webinar. Yep, today's session is going to be recorded. So whoever is interested into getting the recording session, please contact us for more details. All of you guys are muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions panel on your GoToWebinar panel, and me and my colleagues will do our best to answer them during the session. Also, by the end of the presentation, we have allocated a few minutes for a separate Q&A session, of course. What is the agenda for today? First, I'm going to present you with a release overview. In brief, what's new with this Test Studio version, and then we're going to highlight the main features, of course, namely the new executive dashboard functionalities for creating reports, the introduction for web components, support, especially with regards to the Shadow DOM, which will allow you to automate platforms like Salesforce once much more easily with the help of Test Studio. As I said, we're going to have a Q&A session towards the end of the demo, but please do not hesitate to ask us anything in the meantime. And how it is going to happen? we will talk about the new features and demo them ad hoc. It means that we're not going to separate this session into presentation first and demo second. And in the meantime, of course, we're going to ask you some questions. We have 4 quick posts for you. Your feedback is much appreciated, of course. And talking about this post, let us start with the first poll questions. I will leave you 30 seconds or so to share your feedback. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much. I see a lot of interest, by the way, in the CI/CD implementation. This was interesting feedback for us. Thank you one more time, and let's continue with this presentation. So, Test Studio R1 2020 is here. What it will present to you is a set of features, of course, starting with, in brief, with the new executive dashboards reports. Now you can create, review, and share custom reports within your organization. The other big feature that we have added with this release is the support for the web components. I'm going to talk about web components support in details much more a few slides later. But for the ones of you who are aware of this notion, especially with the Shadow DOM, you're going to see how much easier it is to automate such application or platform with this new integration. And a very good example for that is the Salesforce platform built applications. Of course, with this new release, we have introduced a couple of new UX changes. Perhaps you have already seen them on the welcome screen, on the ribbon on top of the tool, and on the Project Explorer. You can see our improvements. As usual, with every release, we update our browser extensions for Firefox, Chrome, and Chromium Edge, the latest browser addition by Microsoft. And last but not least, we have introduced plenty of fixes. Details about this you can find on our release note page on telerik.com for Test Studio. Before I present you the new reports, new functionalities in the executive dashboard, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about this slide. Actually, this is my favorite slide from today's presentation. As you know, we're trying to position Test Studio not only as a QA automation functional tool, but collaboration one. And why so? Because we like to say that everybody has a seat on the table. And thanks to Agile DevOps, it becomes an Agile DevOps table. recently. And why is that so? On one hand, you have the QA department or business analysts or whoever is responsible for creation and building of your tests, right? The main users of the tool. But on the other hand, you have the developers, right? The actual guys who built the application that you're testing and who know the application best. These guys, you know, can collaborate with your team thanks to the Visual Studio plugin. Addition of Test Studio, and with the help of the executive dashboard, we now bring the management team to the table as well. Why is that so? With a quick glimpse at this executive dashboard feature, you can see the overall health and status of your project, right? Whether you are going to share this via email or show it on your TV screens throughout the office, like we do, for example. In Telerik, it's up to you, but you can very easily and quickly see the bottlenecks of the project and how you can go further into that. So that's the main idea of the executive dashboard. And what's new with it is that first, you can see that with the dashboard, I'm going to quickly go back a little bit and explain what it is for our attendees who are not aware. So think of the executive dashboard as a separate web page that you can access throughout your organization network. It means that once you have a Test Studio license, you don't need any additional licensing in order to access this dashboard. Or else said, you can distribute it for free throughout your internal organization if you want. Technically, it exists as a separate service like our scheduling service and feeds on the storage service in the MongoDB. We have a lot of questions, by the way, recently about that, so I want to clear this. And thanks to the executive dashboard, you can see, like on this screenshot here, depending on the project that you select, you can see the execution and the results of the last 10 runs of your test lists, right? And their status. And of course, you can drill down for additional information for each test list in question. What's new with the latest version of Test Studio is that now you can create your own custom report definitions, right? Set the report properties like start date and end date, for example, something that I'm going to show you. Generate the report definition, which later on you can save, edit, or browse if you have numerous such reports created. And here are a few screenshots of how this looks like. Of course, I want to show you this live, so I'm going to pause my screen for a second so I can bring up my dashboard instance and we are going to see what's new. All right, so on your screens, you can see my instance of the executive dashboard. Quickly on the results tab, as I mentioned, up until now, you were able to see the last 10 runs of your test lists. Here are my test lists. You can select the refresh interval so that the data automatically refreshes depending between 1 minute or 1 hour. You can drill down further into those test lists like this. Clicking here, I can see each run here with its details. I can drill down even further, seeing the tests that compose this test list and the run results here with the corresponding details and log. Well, what you can do now is that you can go into the Reports tab section of the executive dashboard and create your new report definition. As you can see here, I can select, let's say, the current month, right? Then I can select the corresponding test lists that should be part of this report. Let me bring up as many as possible, like this one as well, these ones, and let's say this one, right? And if we want to see current month, I'll select the date range from April 1st to April 30th. The report definition is created, and later on you can check those definitions which are still here. Think of definition as the report itself, right? Here are all of mine that I have already created. I can edit them, meaning that I can change the properties. I can even delete them. If I want, you can highlight some of those that you want to bring on the top. And when you click on such custom report, you have some fancy graphics here showing you the overall results. And then you can drill down further into the corresponding test lists with the graphs for them. As you can see here, I have a graphic for each of the test lists. I can switch on, switch off the run dates. All right. So this was, in brief, the new feature that was introduced with R1 2020 for Test Studio's executive dashboard. I'm going back to my presentation now, and it's time for our second poll question. So your feedback within the next 60 seconds or so will be much appreciated. Thank you. All right, poll is closed now. Thank you very much again for your input. It's much appreciated. Now we continue forward with the presentation and the upcoming demo. The other big feature that we have added with the new version of Test Studio is the support for web components. And before we go to the matter, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about web components themselves as a notion, why they were introduced, and how they help you build your and test your actually your applications. For the ones of you who are not that technically oriented. It might be a little bit complex, but I did my best to synthesize the story and the benefits of web components. So everything started around 2013 when Facebook introduced React framework or library, which meant a component-based architecture development. Right. Soon after that, a lot of other providers like Google's Angular adopted this approach, this component-based architecture, and that kind of architecture, component-based, allows the developers to break down their applications into smaller chunks, which are called components. And each of these sections or components may have one or more child components with their different attributes or properties. So think of it as a mix of Lego bricks which you can orchestrate, but at the end you have an application which is much more scalable, maintainable, and reliable. Then comes the web components notion. Imagine that you are already working on such components-based architecture, but you want to create a component in one library or framework, let's say React, and you want React application, but then you want to reuse this in a Angular or Vue, right, application. This is where the web components come in handy. Then imagine that your component could have the same look and behavior no matter what is changed in the global CSS styling, right? Which means that such web component would be kind of encapsulated, if I am to mention. So basically, web components are platform agnostic components that are written in such a way that they have the actual style encapsulated. And for your information, these web components are supported by almost all of the modern JavaScript frameworks. The top 3 currently you can see on your screen, right? So this was in brief the idea and notion of web components. What they consist of are 3 main tiers: the HTML templates, the custom elements, and the shadow DOM. Back in the time, they also had the HTML imports, which recently have been deprecated, so I'm not going to spend time talking about that. And if I am to give an example for an HTML template, this is the part of your HTML that needs to be repeated multiple times. Let's say you're building an application with a contact list, right? And you have some fancy contact card that you need to replicate 100 or 200 times, depending on your application. With the introduction of web components, you don't need to write HTML and code this contact card layout 200 times. You just have to create it once, right? So the benefit of using such HTML templates with their corresponding HTML tags is that your browser is going to parse them but not render them. That's why you need to clone the template, which you're going to see during our coded examples, attach it to the DOM, and the browsers are going to parse the template only once, which means, of course, a much more responsive application, as I mentioned, right? Then you can create custom elements. This gives you the ability to create your own DOM elements. meaning that you can define new HTML ones, or in addition, if you want, you can extend some of the existing ones. Be careful with that, because it's the extension of the element is not supported by all of the browsers. Just for your information, I'm going to show you a coded example for this as well. And last but not least, you have the shadow DOM, which allows you to encapsulate your component so that you make sure that this component looks and feels the same no matter what happens in the global styling CSS, right? It means that when you style and change something on the style of your web component, which is in the shadow DOM, it won't break your entire application's CSS, right? I hope this brief introduction of web components was okay. Of course, if you have any questions or concerns, let us know in the questions panel. This said, I'm going to pass the presentation to my colleague Andy, so he can show you what Test Studio can do with this new feature and how you can benefit from it.
Great, thank you, Peter. All right, I'm getting my screen shared out here. Just a moment, you guys should be able to see it. And it looks like that should be shared for you. So thanks again, Peter, and thanks for everybody for jumping on the session today. We really appreciate the turnout, and we're really happy to have everybody here, and thanks for participating in poll questions. We got a couple more of those coming up as well. And I see a lot of activity on our questions and chat through GoToMeeting as well, so please continue to contribute and be part of that. So the web components and the support that we've just provided, it's another example of really our team working to stay up to date with the latest technologies. And web components, we've seen a lot more rise in the use of this, especially when we run into applications like Salesforce. And what does that mean? What does it mean for the everyday user? Well, what I typically see, and what I guess where I've seen this pop up the most, is you used to see, especially when React kind of started to come out, there was a lot more use of frames and iframes specifically. And from a testing standpoint, those become black boxes sometimes. Well, from a development standpoint, they're difficult, they're cumbersome. Maybe they get the job done, but they weren't the best solution. So web components is a really good next evolution of that. It still gives you that freedom to kind of develop and control your CSS inside your custom element, right? So here we have a small example of a web component application that we may run into from a testing standpoint. And this was something we just put together. So it's not a full-fledged application by any means, but it gives us enough to illustrate what Shadow DOM is, how it works from a Test Studio perspective, basically. So this is what we'll be playing with. Back here, I actually have a basic test that we've made against this application. It just simply navigates, has a number of different verifications in there, and a click step, as you can see. So I'll run this, we'll do this with our annotations. So I'm using our annotations to highlight things for you to be able to see more easily. And we'll execute this test real quick so you can see it running. And I'm just gonna pick on Firefox for now. So really what this boils down to is the web component support in Test Studio is defaulted on for you, and means that you're really not going to see it happening. You may not notice at all that the new web components or that you're working with web components. So I just want to use an example to show you where that might come into play. And right now on my particular instance, it's defaulted on as well. So we'll see, here it's going through some verifications. It's looking at text. It's looking at that title there, also an image. And these are also what we're looking at from a web component standpoint are these cards, right? These are very similar to what Peter was describing. It's a template that's easily reproduced. We see 3 different cards in front of us. Again, one of those web components that's been created in that nature. So using the templates, it's using the custom elements, and of course the shadow DOM that's presenting that too. So at the end of the day, with this setting defaulted on, and you'll see that in the project settings under this general tab here, we've added the web components enabled checkbox. So with it on, we're really not going to see anything, right? We're not going to see the difference. Just know that we are supporting it, we're working with it, and your tests should be, you should be able to go deeper into those applications and do more and working with that shadow DOM. When we turn it off, I'll take you through what that might look like. And actually, if I just use another function here called run to here to just run, I'm just having it run. We'll just run the first couple steps of this test and have it kind of attach the recorder at that point. So we'll do run to here on step 2 there. So this will put me back into record mode in the middle of this test. And once we turn on the element highlighters, when you can really start to see the difference between when the web components checkbox is on and when it's not. And what I'll focus on primarily here are the images here, the ninja images that you see at the top of each of the cards. And once this finishes its verification, it will attach the recorder and the toolbar for us. So we'll let it finish that. And there goes doing verifications. Now this red and yellow highlighting, for those of you that may be new to Test Studio, that's the annotation that I enabled from the checkbox in the execution library there, or menu there. So here's our recording toolbar attached. We can go through and we can highlight, and you can see right now when I go from card to card here, it's just one large element, right? That's just basically not seeing the individual components. Very similarly to how you might experience an iframe if you run into those, where there's elements inside of that. We know there are, but we can't see those or we can't identify those. And using the element highlighter in this way, it's what I call basically looking at an application through the lens of Test Studio. Turn on your recorder, turn on your highlighter, and go float around your interface and see how Test Studio sees your elements, right? So with web component checkbox unchecked, we're seeing those as just singular cards again, you know, one large kind of component with no sort of definition inside that. And then again, just to go back and compare, if we again go to our project settings now and recheck that checkbox, and you'll see that I'm turning off and on the browser, right? So this is changing that. You do need to restart the browser after changing that setting there. So now with that on, we'll go ahead and do the run to here function again. And this time to speed things up, I'm going to turn off annotations. We don't need to rewatch that slowly, but we'll do run to here on step 2 again. And this time when I float over with the checkbox checked for the web components, we'll see if we can see more of the definition that's inside of the shadow DOM, right? That's basically being presented on the UI via the shadow DOM and through those templates. And again, turning on the element highlighter, we go in, we still see that card level, right? We still see that card level, but now we're actually able to highlight the individual image level and of course the individual elements that make up the whole card, right? And there's lots of layers here, some you may not even see, but this is all now open and available to Test Studio because of this new functionality. So again, this is another feature that we've brought to make sure we're keeping up with the latest in technology. I invite you, because of this, to go try some of those difficult situations you may have run into before when trying to record something. Now with this feature turned on, it may be easier than it was previously. You may have access to more layers and elements within the application than you did when that wasn't there. So again, something that's maybe not seen unless you know it's there, but we've added something that's really going to hopefully enhance that as well. Now, something else I want to touch on before we jump back to the presentation is another functionality that a lot of you may have experienced but didn't know was there, and that's our element image backup, right? So if we take, for example, that image that we were playing with, which was captured originally in this verification, and we are to break that. Now let's just run this test step by itself real quick. We're still in the live record mode, so we can do this with run selected steps with one or a selection of steps. We'll just run this one verification on the fly here. And we'll see that it's passing once that comes back. So it's just basically making sure that that image is visible, right? So very quick execution of that test step. Now, and it came back and says, yeah, it passed. So it could find that. Well, let's go in and take a look at what happens when we change that element, or better yet, what often happens in our world when the element is changed for us by somebody else, when something in the application changes, right? In this case, we can see that it's being identified by its tag name, so we know it's an image, combined with its source. So we're looking for that PNG title there. Well, this is a really common one, right? Marketing comes along, they get some new screenshots, all of a sudden the name changes of that element, and we don't have the same identification that we had last time, right? So I'm just basically modifying that to break it, right? And then we'll come back, we'll make sure we save that. Oops, my bad. And then we'll run that selected step again. And with this time now, you would normally expect that, okay, an element logic has been broken. Then that element won't be found and the test will fail, right? Well, what Test Studio implemented, now, gosh, it's been a while, but a couple iterations ago, we have the element image, and we capture that element image during recording. So some of you have seen the cosmetic effect of this, but maybe not understood the functional effect that it provides as well. And what it does is basically not only does it capture an element image for every element you're recording during your recording process, it also uses that image to locate that element if the logic doesn't work any longer. So what that looks like here, it gave me a passing test again. My test is passing. So if you didn't know that this feature existed, you might not even realize it. You might see that your tests are actually passing. Maybe they're not breaking as much as they used to, for example. So now this protects you from that type of break. But be aware that this pass is not just a simple positive, right? If we look at the log, you'll see that it does come with a warning. Unable to locate the element by find expression, so it's kicking in the image search, right? And then it's able to find it in that case that way. So this is where that another feature, again, another enhancement, a big enhancement that we made to Test Studio that's helping your test be more stable, be more robust and stand up over time and not break, not completely ruin your day because of a small change like this. Now, what you'll see, so when you're running in a quick execution mode, as we call it here, and you get that pass, you won't see the warning there. You will see it on the log level. So when you're looking at logs, and you'll more often see that as a result of test lists. And you'll see over here in my Dynamics 365, for example, I have one here that has warnings, right? So you will see it here if you have a test list execution that runs into one of these image backup situations, and you'll be able to drill in and see that this was an element that got that warning. So the step passes because it kicked in the element backup, it found it by its image, it clicked it or did whatever. In this case, it clicked it, does whatever it's supposed to do to it, and it can continue the test so it doesn't break your test at that point, right? Now, one other thing to point out before we go back to the next thing is that you do have the ability at the project level settings to disable this functionality, to turn off whether it scrolls to an image as well, to have image previewing. So really you can turn this off if you wanted to. You can also at the step level determine if you'd like to search by image first. So sometimes, and you can see this even at the project level too, I should mention one other place to show you in the Find Logic settings that you have that option to search by image first. So you now have complete control over using image first. Maybe if you're in an application that relies a lot on that, you can search by image first, or if you wanted to, you could start with the Find Logic first and have it search by image in that backup method. So you can do that project level, you can do that at the step level here too. You can say, well, this particular step maybe works better, and this is another troubleshooting tip for you as well. When you're running into issues with an element of fine logic or some kind of dynamic situation, hopefully there's less of those now because we support the web components. But in those kinds of situations, you could say, let's go change this to run by the image. Let's use the image first to find the element instead of second, for example. So that gives you more flexibility or more things to try when you're troubleshooting your test as well. All right, so that's it from the web components side of things. Let's get back to the presentation. Peter, did you want to share your screen or should I stay on my side?
Oh, you can continue on, it's okay, with the next slide. Or...
All right, perfect. So, so this is a look back to what the web components look like from a DOM standpoint. You know, you can see the template here, that blog card template that's there. Inside of the container, there's slots basically that are made for those subcomponents, that things like the title and the description have those slots here. You can see the defined custom element itself and the shadow root that basically calls that template. So this is that shadow portion of the DOM. So we're basically peering into that shadow DOM, where before it might have been a brick wall that we got to from a DOM standpoint. We couldn't see anything beyond it. Similarly to what we saw with iframes before, where all of a sudden we kind of ran into a brick wall and couldn't see things inside that frame. This is a key to unlocking that door or getting through that brick wall and now seeing, basically shining a light into the shadow DOM, I suppose. So as I mentioned, this means cleaner and deeper tests, right? We can get into those layers, we can find those elements, and then we can work and interact with those elements. More applications that we can support now. Salesforce is something we've had a lot of interest in because a lot of our customers do utilize it. And it's a pretty big audience that uses it as well. But of course, if you have particular applications that you use Test Studio for, feel free to let us know as well. We're happy to learn about more applications that we should pay attention to if we see trends like that. And of course, modern, right? We want to continue to be modern and stay up with what's happening in the changes in web technologies and the latest web technologies to make sure that we are continuing to be the easiest web tool to use or web testing tool to use on the market. And of course, as I mentioned, Salesforce being that part of it. So now we'll go to our third poll question for the session. Again, thanks for participating in the polls, and we've got a little bit more here to wrap up, but we'll go ahead with the next poll question now. Oh, let's make sure we get the poll question up. Okay, it is going good. Great. All right, I think we'll close that out. I appreciate again everybody's participation in that. At this point, we do want to open it up. We've got lots of time left in the hour. We've got a couple of our developers and our product management along with us, as well as myself and Peter. We invite you to ask away. There's been lots of great questions. Many of those have been answered in the chat. And I think we may even get a chance maybe to hear from Ilion on some of those questions if you wanted to bring some of those up, or Peter.
All right, yep. I see we have a few questions outstanding. Here, some of them concern the CI setup. We also have something about scheduling and reporting. So how can we share the reports with teammates? Apologies if I didn't express myself well enough during the first presentation. As I mentioned, when you use the executive dashboard feature, actually, let me see if I can share my screen one more time. Let's show you. All right. So when you go to the executive dashboard, what you can see now, so the URL that you take, whether you're going to share the results of the test list runs, right? Or if you want to create a custom report for you or for your team, whenever you share the link, the URL, it can be accessed within your network by anyone without the necessity for them to have a license. So this is one of the ways to share reports and custom reports with your team. And the other option, of course, is while you are within a custom report, you can export the data to PDF file and then again share it with the team, right? I hope this answers the question.
Awesome.
Can I integrate? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to jump into. I saw another one about more about the element images, and I could definitely show a little bit further on that as well. Are you seeing my screen, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so just to come back, there was a couple questions to kind of go a little further on the images. I mentioned that with the element image logic, now keep in mind, if you have an older project and older tests that were done, that were created prior to the element image capability coming out, they're not going to automatically get images, right? That once that feature is out, anything that's recorded after that should have the new element images. Now, of course, you can go back into old tests and add images to elements and add images to steps or re-record things. So everything can be made to come up to that level. But what you'll see with that functionality is when elements are captured, an image is captured, and if you float over that element from the element repository, you'll see preview of that element image. You'll also see it down below in this area below the test step. And so again, you can see the details there. If I float over here, I'll see it there. Now, this is also not just a presentation of the image. You can actually click into this to get to the image logic. And this is basically where you have the ability to preview the image. You have some recognition settings that you can invoke as well, a threshold, right? So a percentage of match, pixel match that you would want to make sure that the image is accurate. And the scroll, right? And that scroll means go find the image no matter where it is on the page. And you may have discovered image backup kicking in sometimes if you're watching your test execute, and all of a sudden you might see it even count down the step where it starts to fail. And then all of a sudden it's scrolling all over your page. And that's actually the image backup search kicking in and doing that scrolling to find your image. And if it locates it, then enacting or acting against it. So this is where that element image is stored for each element. You do have the ability to delete it. You have the ability to see what steps use it. You also can jump in and validate the image, upload a new file, select from the browser, run to a certain step. So these are all controls and capabilities to work with when you're customizing and when you're kind of working on your image recognition. Now, I also want to point out too, if you click this image settings, it will take you to the find logic settings, right? So if you're ever in an element find logic, that's another way that you can get into this, is simply start by right-clicking an element and click edit element. By default, it takes you to that element's find logic. you can always click over to the image of that element as well. So this consider this button a way to switch between those two. And as you can see, the image options that pop up when you're on the image side. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more clarification on that and how and why and where those components are. So.
Thank you very much, Andy, for answering this one. Allow me to take another one because on the first poll, we had a lot of interests about the CI/CD implementation. And also I see that there is a kind of a rather general question: how can I integrate Test Studio with my CI setup? There are different options here as far as Test Studio is concerned, depending on the technology that you use. Let me share my screen here. In the meantime, I managed to start one of the DevOps agents that I have configured on my machine. So as I mentioned, depending on the technology you use, whether it's TeamCity, Bamboo, Jenkins, TFS, or DevOps, you can achieve that with Test Studio. For this specific example, here, as you already know, we talk directly to DevOps and or TFS by means of you can share your bugs or tests into this repository. On your screen, you can see the task with those beautiful bugs submitted directly from Test Studio into DevOps. But as far as pipelines are concerned, for example, whenever you create a new pipeline, whether it's going to be a build or a release, you can attach such agent after you configure it in advance. And when you execute and run it, this agent will automatically trigger, meaning that your test lists will execute with the build. And at the end, you will have your results, which you can see into DevOps results screen, or you can have the corresponding bugs submitted. Of course, the entire configuration and explanation is a whole new topic of conversation. It will take much more time, but I hope I managed to answer this question in brief.
Great. I saw another question about, can the dashboard be made available outside of your network, especially for people working from home? And you know, really depends on the way you want to configure that for your your IT team, I guess. Can it be done? Yes, it could be done, but it is up to the way that network is configured.
All right, let me see and browse through.
Yeah, lots of great questions. We'll also make sure to follow up on any of these questions that we didn't get to. So we appreciate you guys. Please feel free to submit more. And then if you're interested, I know we did we have one more poll? I believe we do. Actually, it'd be a good time to go ahead and throw out that last poll question, because I believe we do have one more to go. So let's give everybody a chance to respond to that. That's basically, I think, in line with a lot of the questions that we're getting right now, is whether you'd be interested in you know, helping validate new features and things like that. So as we asked previously, you know, if there's people that are interested in joining, you know, meeting with us or having us review sort of your current state of your Test Studio usage or your projects, we're always happy to do that. You know, reach out to your salesperson to coordinate that. They'll contact myself and Peter and our team, and of course Ilion and the product team if needed as well. So we're always open to that. So please feel free, you're not stuck. We're happy to help and learn more from you guys too. So whether it's features or advice, you know, we'll basically we'll be happy to jump in and help you all. All right, so we're wrapping up our final poll question. give you guys a little bit more time on that. There was a question about some CSS. You can use some, as far as like testing theme, I mean, you can basically verify a lot of different aspects of Elements CSS. You know, where you'll find a lot of that is in the toolbar. I'm glad that actually came up, because you'll, with the element highlighter, right? If we come back into an element situation like this, and I'm not showing my screen, am I? Let me make sure I am. Are you seeing my screen, Peter, or no? It's your screen.
Now you should be able to share yours.
Yep, okay, cool. Thank you, sir. So yes, to get some of those cosmetic verifications, you'll see with the element highlighter turned on, we float over something, we get quick verifications, and these are more what we consider functional verification, which means, you know, if it doesn't pass the verification, we want it to fail. We don't want the test to go forward. That's what I would consider functional. Like, did we succeed at logging in? No? Okay, fail the test. If we succeeded at logging in, yes, then okay, let's continue the test. So that's what you'll see. You'll get mostly out of this type of verification. But keep in mind, if you go down to build step, so we're highlighting our target element that we want to add the step for. And in that hover over menu at the bottom is build step. And that basically invokes this toolbar. So you see it actually took me to that spot in the DOM. We got the different layers here. And if you click through the DOM layers, you'll see it highlight the above layers there as well. So this is that heading. And inside of the toolbar, if I can get this back a little bit further up into view here, we'll undock it and try to float things here a little better. Sorry, y'all, technical issues here. That'll be better. Okay. Oop. Now I've clicked too many times. I have to wait for Firefox. All right, so once this comes back alive, basically with the DOM element highlighter turned on, you go down to the menu here, and as I mentioned, you can click through here too and kind of see different layers. Sometimes you might want to check out that you get the right options for each of those layers. And then over here, you've got verification options that include things like style and attributes. And my apologies, it looks like my GoToMeeting froze a little bit. Let's see if we can get it back on track here. Apologize. Ah, okay, had a hidden window there. Okay, guys, sorry about that. Let me get back into that. So that was from this web components test, and we're in this step here. I'll just get back to that with my run to here again so that we can jump in and see that particular spot in time. So as I was saying, you float over it, you go down to build step, that invokes the toolbar. The toolbar has a lot of other options down there, and that's really what I want to get to, is to show you what those options are. There are things like, is it the right font? Is it the right color? Is it the display settings correct? You know, so a lot more of those stylistic and cosmetic verification options are there in the toolbar here. Forgive me for that taking a little bit of time, but now that we're back, I can show you what I was trying to originally. And here we can see from a style, we've got computed or inline, and of course you've got like font, color and background, text, display. And when you make selections on these, it populates the current value for you. So then all you need to do from there, it's basically constructing your test step for you by making those selections. And then you click add step to add that to your test, right? So again, we can choose style, we can go in and choose, you know, things like text or maybe display setting here, it's on auto. So we've just built a verification backend test studio over here that will verify that the display width style is set to auto. So, all right, I know we're at the end of our time. I want to give Peter another chance to bring up anything else. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover real quick?
One really last question from our attendee. Can we automate the report sending? Yep. Whenever you schedule and execute a test list within Test Studio, you can get the results via email or depending on how you configure that. So this can be absolutely automated.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think we all want to give you guys another big thank you for showing up to our release webinar. We're super happy, and you know, again, reach out if you need anything, if you have any questions for us. Again, if you are interested in participating in looking at new features and things like that, we're happy to hear from you. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you all.